Clearly, I don't have Shulk's talents of reading the future, because I never would have imagined I'd be in this point of making this video, talking about this game, and let alone playing this game, and playing this game as long as I have. Today's video is something really interesting, and I really wanted to share my thoughts and my journey of finally stepping into the world of Xenoblade Chronicles. This is coming from a huge Nintendo fan who's played almost every single series that Nintendo has had to offer, including the obscure F-Zero and Kid Icarus series, but I never touched the Japanese RPGs that Nintendo would offer up, like Fire Emblem and Xenoblade. But I set out this year to finally make that change, to finally step into a new direction with my Nintendo gameplays and try out Xenoblade Chronicles for the first time with Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. What you're seeing is a lot of trailer gameplay, and I also included some gameplay at the end. I didn't record my entire session, just a journey of me going through some of the locations and a couple of battles just to have some gameplay up there. I just wanted to enjoy my playthrough and not worry about filming it the entire time. And also, I will be separating this video from stuff that's non-spoilery in case I convince any of you guys to try this game out. The second half will be full of spoilers and my thoughts with some of the post-game stuff. I'll also put timestamps for when those spoilers hit, so that way you can be prepared if you don't want to be spoiled of the main story or anything like that. But without further ado, let's get into my journey of how this even happened in the first place. The first time I ever even heard about Xenoblade was Smash Brothers for the Wii U, and it was when Shulk was obviously revealed in Gar Plains, jumping out of a bush and backslashing Bowser, and for a while that's really all I knew Shulk as, this weird kid who could see the future and had these funny little symbols on his sword called the Monado, which allowed him to have different status effects, and he was okay. I never really cared about him in Smash. I still don't to this day. I think he's probably one of the weaker characters, but still, I thought, you know, sure, why not? He seems pretty interesting. But thanks to Smash Brothers, the curiosity did start to spark, and I was actually kind of curious into the actual game that he comes from. I started watching some gameplay trailers and stuff from the Wii, and I was never really that interested. The combat never really looked very interesting to me, and I just didn't feel like diving into that world. Plus, the only thing I seemed to really care about at the time seemed to be the story. It started to really draw on me that there was a big story with this game, and I heard people talking about it. So what did I do? Did I buy the game to see the story? No, I actually went online and watched all the cutscenes in the compilation. Well, not all of them, about halfway through the story, and I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much, I felt that there might be a time where I actually decide to play the game, so I don't want to spoil the rest of the story. So I left it at that, and by the time I did this, I was pretty much around, you know, freshman, sophomore year of high school. The time went on, and he was revealed again for Smash Ultimate, and I just didn't care. Xenoblade was just one of those franchises that I would just roll my eyes at when it was announced in the Nintendo Direct, and I felt like Nintendo spent way too much time on this little niche franchise that not too many people, myself included, was invested in. Now, I never want any franchise for Nintendo to do bad. I'm Nin10doland after all. I want them all to succeed evenly. But at the same time, I was so tired of seeing Fire Emblem stuff and Xenoblade stuff. I was just so sick of it, and a lot of the reveals were making me upset. Like a final reveal being Xenoblade 3, which I couldn't care less about. And also the addition of Pyra and Mythra in Smash Ultimate as a DLC fighter was also a pretty big letdown to me. And I remember seeing the reveal trailer for Xenoblade Definitive Edition that ended a Direct, and I was so upset that this game ended the Direct. I'm like, dude, it came out on the Wii, then re-released on the 3DS, now it's back on the Switch. I was just so upset, and I just couldn't care less about this series. And every time I had a little bit of interest thinking about it, I would just ultimately fall short of wanting to purchase this game, mostly because of that combat. I just did not care about the kind of moving around an enemy and letting your own character auto-attack for you as you just pick special abilities. It just didn't look fun to me. But then, one day, for some reason, I said, fine, let's give it a shot. And that day was the beginning of this year, around February. And I said to myself, look, if you don't like it, you don't have to play it. At least you gave it a try, and you can tell people you tried it, but it's just not for you. And I kind of had the expectations that I wasn't going to like it, that the combat system would just be too boring for me, and I would ultimately give up on it. But either way, I decided to finally dive into the world of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, and this is how it went. Yeah, I'm not going to keep you held up on what I actually thought with my initial thoughts. I'll just show you this. Yeah, this is the in-game screen, and this is my playtime. I cannot believe how much I actually ended up enjoying this game. So why not just start off by talking about all the pros of my experience? So straight up, oh my gosh, the world building. Dude, this is so crazy to me. I have never played a game that made me this invested in landscape in my life. Like, you always come across areas in video games you're just like, oh, that's a pretty area, or, that's a good looking area. You'll remember those locations and stuff. And, Breath of the Wild had a lot of them, but at the end of the day, this is like the first time I genuinely was like so excited to see the next area in the game. The game takes place on 2 giant titans, and the fact that you have to go from the ankle of your titan all the way up to the head, down the arm, across the sword of the other titan, you fall down onto the ground where his fallen arm is, climb all the way up his titan, and then journey back to your titan to find out the truth of what's going on is so crazy. Like, crazy. Every area that you get to, you can see the outside world. You can see, in comparison to where you are in that world to where you need to go. Going on the, Gar Plains, which is like literally the Bionis' knee, which is the name of the titan that you're on, and you can look up and see the Bionis' chest, his arms, his head. You can look across the sky and see the Mechanis, the other titan. You can see where you are in relative position to that titan all the time, and vice versa when you're on the Mechanis looking back at the Bionis. It's crazy. You could just look at these areas of these giant titans and say, I was on that. I was traversing that. I was going across terrain on this dude's arm, on his back, on his head. It's how they took these locations and placed them on these titans. And besides it just being on these 2 giant creatures, these areas are breathtaking. Look at the Sotoro Marsh. You'll be like, okay, this is a cool little swamp area, nothing special and stuff, until nighttime hits, which was like a casual thing because I didn't really change the time that much in the beginning. It just turned into nighttime, and just the entire landscape changes to this mystical, beautiful, glowing forest at night. It is phenomenal, and the music that plays is one of my now favorite themes that I've ever heard in a Nintendo game. And I was like, there's no way in the world that Nintendo's gonna pass that. Like, this is the peak of the game. I was like, every single time I got to a new area, I was like, this is gonna be the peak area. Nothing's going to like compete with this. And I was always constantly wrong. I mean, getting to Machina Forest and seeing like the whole top part of the Bionis, kind of his back area, seeing the giant tree where the Nopon live, and seeing the waterfall surrounding the area and walking across these giant bridges, I'm just like, dude, seriously, how was this on the Wii? Obviously, the graphics weren't the greatest back on the Wii, but still having these vast, giant worlds to run all over and explore in this world building back on the Wii, I'm so mad at myself for not knowing about this, because immediately I said to myself, how in the world was people not talking about this? And I'm serious, like no one I knew, no friends, no real big publications were talking about Xenoblade. And I think it was based on like a localization thing or something. I think it was like really big in Japan at first, but still, I just can't believe, like, when we talk about games like Galaxy and the, memories that it brought us, in games like Skyward Sword, which had great story, which I'm going to get into in a second. How is this game not brought up in discussion with some of those games? Because, man, the worlds are so beautiful here. I could talk about the worlds nonstop. Seriously, I could just sit here and discuss each and every single location and stuff. I'll do a little bit more when I get into the spoiler stuff. But I want to move on to the story. The story is, without a doubt, the best story that I have ever witnessed in a video game. And I play a lot of games, don't get me wrong. I'm not just Nintendo land. I have a PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I play through so many story-driven games, and I have some really big ones that I love. One of my favorite ones that I just completed was Final Fantasy VII Remake. I could tell that trilogy of games retelling the original game is going to be so good. But this just blows it out of the water to me, seriously. And before this, my favorite Nintendo-given story was probably Skyward Sword. Skyward Sword lays nothing compared to this, and I'm a huge Zelda fan. This story kept me captivated the entire time to figure out where these giants came from, what is Shulk's purpose in all this. And almost every single time we got further into the story, it completely changed the general theming of the story altogether. You find new characters, new races that completely change the lore and add so much more information into the grand scope of everything. And by the end, you'll be mind blown by where it actually goes. It's crazy. Like I said, I'll talk about it here at the end of the video, but it's just like truly the best story ever told. Ever told. Diving back into the worlds real quick, I know I'm all over the place. That's just how this video is going to be. I love just traversing these worlds. There's not a whole lot to find. You'll be mostly getting some small collectibles and items and stuff that you'll use for side quests. Maybe, you know, just fighting these different enemies that you find. Maybe special enemies that give you affinity coins and also gear. But I just love running around these areas and then coming across a giant creature that's just like 40 levels higher than you and just seeing that thing walking around. It's like, man, one day I'm going to fight that thing. Like, I'm going to come back eventually. It gives me something to do later on and fight that thing. And seeing little creatures like these little Jawa looking Star Wars creatures, it is just like, there's so many wacky creatures and races and stuff that you'll fight and go against. There's even like a group of like Lizalfos like characters in the Satoral Marsh, and I thought that was pretty cool. Something else I'll say is I absolutely love the characters in this game. They add so much. I care about every single one of them, from Ricky all the way to Dunban, to Melia. I care about where they come from. They all have like these individual plot stories with characters that they've lost or something, and you know, the journeys that they've gone on, and they join you into this long journey. But like I said, it ties into the overall story of Shulk just wanting to get revenge on the Mechon for, you know, the damage that they have caused the Homs. And it just starts off as a simple revenge story, but opens up into something just so much bigger. I also love the journey that Shulk goes on and his character in this, where he's not just this ruthless guy ready to kill anything and everything. He's just like, I'm not going to kill a human. I'm not going to kill life. Like, my job is to take out any monsters that might be trying to hurt us, or any robot machines of the Mechon that are trying to defeat us. Like, he has a good heart. He's a good spirited guy. And I love his journey that he goes on and the things that he learns about himself is truly spectacular. He is a great protagonist and one of my favorites from Nintendo series now. I have seen some comments of people saying the voice acting is kind of corny, and there are definitely some moments where I was like, okay, that came across cheesy and stuff, but overall, I felt like it was really good. Some of these characters and their voices, it really comes through when they're like yelling or they're feeling like really upset. There's a lot of times where Shulk just screams as he's swinging down the Monado in order to hit something. There's some really good encounters against like Metal Face and the Mechon and stuff that you could just hear it from both of them that just come across. Some of the audio doesn't come across great. Like when you fight some of the faced Mechon, they have like this really weird audio sound, like it's trying to be muffled because they're in these like giant mech suits and like the voice is coming across really weird. It almost sounds like a bad radio frequency. It's not terrible by any means, but it is kind of weird. And also you'll hear the same dialogue repeated sometimes. Like there's a couple of bosses that you just keep hearing the same thing, and I'll talk about more of that when I get there with the spoilers. But yeah, I was just like, dude, I'm so sick of hearing the same line. So I wish they were a little bit more diverse with the lines, but the characters, the voice acting, I think was really, really well done here. One of the last pros I want to talk about before I move on to my cons is the music. Dude, I love Nintendo music. I have a full playlist on SoundCloud of like the best tracks from all across the franchises from Nintendo. And I'll say right now, after completing this game, I 100% have to update that SoundCloud track because, dude, almost every single area in this game had me humming the music. And it's not just because I'm running through some of these areas for multiple hours on end. It's just the fact that it's just that catchy. The daytime theme, the nighttime theme for every area, the battle themes that are different from Bionis and Mechonis, which are both so good, the boss themes, the story themes that you'll hear time and time again during certain plot points. This soundtrack is phenomenal, like truly, truly phenomenal. It has become one of my favorites, and it's still not my favorite. You know, I'm saying it's up there though. Tropical Freeze is still my favorite soundtrack of all time, but this is very much up there, and I would even say in the same category, like in the same grouping. Not better, but in the same grouping. It has some phenomenal soundtracks, and I still to this day find myself humming them in the shower, when I'm just walking around, running on the treadmill, working out. I even listened to some of the soundtrack while I was working out. I don't care. It was just that good. I needed to, because it's just so good. I could talk about it nonstop, but you just have to play it to listen to it, or just straight up listen to it if you want, if you still don't want to play it. But yeah, but now I want to move on to some of the cons, because as much as I love this game, I feel like there's some things that I just wasn't the biggest fan of. Let's start off with the combat. Okay, so I do not hate the combat, and this is the biggest thing that I was worried about playing this game. And I will admit, at first I was kind of like, yeah, this is pretty much what I was expecting, but it started to get better for some reason. And when I say for some reason, it's just because I don't know why. Because overall, I found myself doing the same moves with almost every single enemy in the game over and over and over again. But still, for some reason, it was addicting, and I think it's mostly due to the enemy design and the fact that it was just really accessible. It's simple. There's not a lot to learn about it. It has some elements that might be a little deep, but for the most part, I'm telling you right now, there's not anything that should scare you off as far as just like technicalities, and I think it's extremely simple and streamlined. It's really easy to get the hang of and understand. Now, most of the game, I just played as Shulk unless I was getting bored of his combat, which I would switch to another character to lead for a little bit, but for the most part, I just wanted to be Shulk because he like always dealt the most damage, and I felt like I can maximize my damage the most with him and control my team better. But yeah, I just felt like even with all the other characters, a lot of the time, besides like maybe Melia, which had some really cool things with her ether attacks, I feel like most of the characters, you would just do the same things. Your job is to find a way to topple the enemy by hitting them with a break, getting them to topple, and then you can stun them with a third attack to get them to be like kind of starry dazed as you just continue to wail on the enemy. And I feel like this is what you do with every enemy. It's the same concept. I run up, I use Shadow Eye so that way he doesn't target me, and then I just run around the enemy to maximize the best hits I can, because you need to get behind the enemy or beside the enemy in order to maximize some of your art attacks. And your arts are just different abilities along the bottom row. This was cool. I don't really have a problem with this. Shulk only had a certain amount, so you couldn't really swap his out, but everybody else, you could swap their arts out for better ones or for different ones that fit your playstyle. But for the most part, yeah, it's just extremely simple. You walk up with a break art, somebody else in your group topples them, and then you can actually stun them. Now, my problem is I kind of wish I could control the other characters. I feel like that was the problem, only being able to do that during a triple attack, which kind of sucked because I feel like the AI is okay, but there's a lot of times I'm just like waiting for them to use topple. I'm like, come on, someone use it, because they either already exhausted it and I don't even know. You have to really listen to what moves they're using over there as you're fighting so that you make sure you can time yours up. Yeah, it was just kind of confusing. So I actually do wish the combat was a little deeper. I feel like they could have done a little bit more, and I don't know if this is something that people want, but I think eventually I would even love to see them do something like Final Fantasy VII Remake. At least for me, I think that would be really interesting, allowing me to attack at free will and then use my arts as a separate thing. It would like kind of slow down time real quick for me to use each individual art, but I would love to just straight up, have the access to attack as well instead of it just auto-attacking all the time. But that's just me. I don't know. I think that's just coming off of a Final Fantasy VII Remake high. So I just think that would be a really cool addition in the future. But yeah, I feel like around halfway through, or around 75% of the game, I started to get to the point where I was like, okay, I get how this works. I got to constantly do this over and over and over again, the same, 3 steps, break, topple, stun. It's just like the same things, and it got kind of old after a while, but never to the point where I wanted to stop playing. It was still kind of weirdly addictive, and that makes me very hopeful because I heard 2 and 3 have a lot better combat, especially 2. It's just very difficult, I heard, and you have to probably have guides online to figure out how to do it. But yeah, I just wanted a little bit more. I think that's all it honestly needs for now, is just, a little bit more in-depth gameplay and just giving me the option to also switch to different characters, because as I'm waiting for my arts to reload, I can't really do anything besides just run around and let him auto-attack. I would really love to take over for another character, especially when I needed healing really fast and, my AI Charla is just taking too long to do anything. So, yeah. As far as lineup, I feel like for the most part, I went with Shulk and then a tank, which is normally Rein, and then I would go with a third, like, if I just wanted to maximize, damage, I would go with Dunban or another character that you would get later on. But then when I got into some of the harder enemies, I'd always go with Shulk, a tank, and then a healer being Sharla. Was pretty much just how I played the entire game. And I really didn't have any problems. There was a couple times where a boss was like, ooh, that was kind of tough. But I only got stopped at the final boss the hardest. That was, without a doubt, a frustrating time for me, and I'll talk about that when I get into spoilers, but for the most part, the combat wasn't terrible, it wasn't even bad, it just got kind of boring after a while, but definitely was manageable. I mean, I put in almost 80 hours of doing this combat. It's really not as bad as I was thinking it was going to be. My second complaint, which might be weird, I don't know, but I felt like there was way too many side quests, like way too many. I think someone said it was like 400 something side quests. It might even be more than that, I can't remember, but there's just so many side quests, and I wish there were less but more meaningful side quests, because so many of them is just like, hey, go run all the way over here and find this item, and then run all the way back and bring it to me. Or, hey, go all the way to this region, kill 3 of these enemies, and then come back. You know, it's just like, it was just pointless stuff of just killing enemies, or especially if they wanted a specific item from an enemy and it was a rare drop, you had to constantly just keep fighting the same enemies over and over and over again in order to get that item, which was never guaranteed. So it was a lot of saving, reloading, just sitting in one area for 30 minutes at a time, just fighting enemies trying to get those items. And when I was accepting these side quests, thankfully you can accept them all like right away, which I was doing from the beginning. But the problem is, it's just so annoying when you do a side quest and you finally complete it, and then immediately that same character pops up with another side quest, and some of them do it like 4 or 5 times, or some of them have like 4 or 5 side quests of tracking down enemies and stuff, and it's just like back to back to back to back to back to back, which is just like, oh my gosh. Thankfully, there's like this future, like Shulk can look into the future and see which items you need if you collect something before reaching that side quest. He'll be like, hey, you know, kind of giving the player a hint, you need to find 6 of these in the future, so it's probably a good idea that you start finding them now. So I like that, that's cool, but still, there's just way too many side quests in this game. I know they're all optional, but you're going to need to do a lot of them, especially if you want to reach a certain level, because I feel like towards the late game, it really requires you to grind and to be a specific level if you're wanting to compete. Which was also my problem, because I felt like I did every single side quest early. Like, as soon as I got them, I tried to do them, and I took breaks in between the story to do them. So when I got to the sea, I felt like I was, you know, very much over-leveled. I was, like, beating every enemy by, like, over 3 or 4 levels, and I decided to, like, calm down on fighting everything, but still, I was doing every side quest. By the time I got to the final boss, I did pretty much every main side quest I could do up to that point, and still by then I was severely underleveled, which was weird, because I also felt like I was fighting every big enemy, every enemy that was at least a level under my level or a couple levels above, and I was fighting pretty much everything that I found. I still wasn't the high enough level. I was having problems with the final boss, and like I said, it's hard to talk about it without getting into spoilers, so I'll talk about it when I get there. I feel like some of the RPG mechanics here are outdated as well. For instance, the skill trees was kind of a mess to me. I didn't really understand what I was doing, and I've seen a lot of people had this same issue. I probably could figure out if I really dove into reading each thing and what it did, if I matched it with what partner, but I didn't care enough, you know what I mean? So I would just constantly go through and, hey, if a slot's open, I'll see if there's another slot to connect it to with another player. I really didn't pay attention to what I was doing. I was just filling slots randomly. And it just felt like it was very convoluted. I really didn't know what I was doing half the time. I did not like Affinity. There is a lot of like little Affinity quests that you could find where you'll have like a heart-to-heart moment, but I couldn't do any of them. Like, I only was able to do like 3 out of like the 50 that were in the game. And I'm like, who's gonna have these levels of affinity with these characters, especially when some of them you get them so later on? Like, it was just so weird to me, and I felt like I was only gonna have a good affinity with the characters that I liked. I didn't feel like swapping them out enough, and even when I did, I swapped out my team to just do some side quests and see if the affinity would grow from there, and I did like 30 side quests, and I would barely notice any change. I know there's some way to give gifts, and I've seen that thing. I haven't really experimented with it and how it works, and I saw online that a lot of this can be done in post-game. Everything that I found online, in fact, was a lot of people asking the same questions and being told to pretty much just wait and do this post-game. It's not needed now, which just makes me wonder why it was even added in the first place, if I gotta wait and do it once I already finished the base game. But eventually I'll probably try to figure out, you know, how the trading items go. I guess some items work better with partners, and it can just grow affinity in between them when you give them good items that they like, and I don't know. Personally, I just think it's weird. I wasn't a fan of this mechanic. As far as collecting things, though, I really liked it. Like, filling out my Collectopedia by just going around and collecting things I found in the overworld was really satisfying to fill out that entire log. It's just something that I actually found enjoyment out of. It's just some of the things with, like, affinity and stuff I just didn't understand and I didn't care about. Eventually, I probably will go back and try to complete those now if I find an easy way to grow affinity between everybody. Also, I don't know what the other section is for with the Collectopedia. I don't even know what that image is and what location that's supposed to be. I don't know if that's like the post game, like the stuff with the side story, the DLC, whatever. But yeah, I don't know yet. I just started Future Connected, but I'm sure I'm going to love it. So I didn't want to even really talk about it right now because, you know, I pretty much love this game. I didn't even need to talk about that post game stuff, at least not right now. But enough of that. Let's dive into some of the spoilers. I'm just going to kind of recycle through the different things that I've talked about, but this time all spoilers. So once again, this is the spoiler section, so you are being warned now. But anyways, the two Titans and traversing them was just amazing. Going up through the inside of the Mechonis was different, and I actually kind of was expecting there to be like a giant, you know, field or like some type of biological stuff on the outside, kind of like the Bionis had, but it's all mechanic. It's completely different, and I get that, but it was like called, you know, everybody's like, you're going to be entering the Mechonis field, and it's not a field at all. It's like the inside of a factory, but going up through the inside was a lot different, and I actually really liked that. Don't even go inside the Bionis' like heart at the end, which is just so cool, returning, finding out the truth, and that's something else I loved about the story so much. It's just like this whole time, the people that you're fighting for, the Titan that you're fighting for is the villain, and learning the whole thing with Zanza was such a story just flip around that was just so good to learn. It was like, what? It was like, you know, the Mechon aren't necessarily bad. It's just they have hatred for what happened to them thanks to the Bionis, and learning about Shulk's body pretty much being used as a vessel in order for all this to play out was so crazy. And then finally Shulk learning that it doesn't matter what happened to him. He can choose to change the future himself, and that it doesn't matter that this so-called God is making everything happen the way he wants it to happen and the way he wants it to play out. In this entire time, he's kind of getting counsel and help from this weird guy named Alvis that we find out is like a whole computer program in the first place, which is so crazy that this whole time, you know, he's saying that you could either win this or you could lose this. It's up to you to make your own path. How do you want things to go? Do you want Zanza to rule the world or not? And then especially at the end, walking through like the different planets and stuff, and like kind of giving the story almost a more grounded approach, showing exactly what happened in the past, that this was just Earth, and these were some people, some scientists in a space station, and Zanzo was just a scientist, and so was Maynith. And it's so cool to see that, and how Zanza just got cocky and accidentally created this giant, you know, Big Bang event that reset the universe. I'm just like, dude, who was in the studio writing this? They just wrote the most fire script of all time. This story is so good. There were so many just raw cutscenes too, and it was just like these moments that I just loved and that just stick in my head, of like Shulk using the Monado, and just like really cool cutscenes of him flipping and flying around and dodging things. And I really love the moment where Zanza just points the Monado at Shulk's face, and Shulk doesn't even flinch, and he just looks back and points his Monado back, and it's just like, oh, this boy is raw, man. It was just moments like that that just kind of gave me goosebumps. It was just like these characters have moments of just like their true, like, you know, personality show and who they really are, and I just love stuff like that. It really just, oh, it's just so good. The villains are good, the story is good. I love the Dixon twist and stuff, and how he's just like an apprentice to Zanza. I love the stories of like the original people with Arglass being friends with Eggle, and thanks to the stupid Monado, it started like this thing where Zanza was just lonely, but he also wanted to enslave, and he wanted to live forever, which means he had to have, you know, pretty much the Telethia, which was like his own pets, go through and eat everything on the body of the Bionis in order to keep him regenerated and stuff, and he just wanted to control everything himself. It was just like, oh, he made life on the Bionis based on his views, and Maynith made life on the Mechonis based on her views, and it's just so good. Daggone it, Nintendo, you got me feeling for a game, which I haven't done in a very long time. This was such a great story. But I want to dive a little bit further into that combat, like I said, in the end of the game, which I had a little bit of a problem with. So I kind of blasted through Dixon. I was about level 77, 78, and I blasted through phase 1 of Zanza, but phase 2 was obliterating me. I tried to change out my party members. I tried a million different things, and it just came down soon as those little henchmen came out. He would use some type of attack that would just wipe the entire crew immediately. And if a tank was out, he would pretty much almost wipe them, which would leave me with literally like nothing to do. But I couldn't figure out what to do. I had no choice but to go back and try to level up a little bit more. And the problem with that is the game doesn't save right before the final boss, which is stupid. Every RPG that I have ever played saves before the final boss, just in case you're not high enough of a level so you can go back and become a higher level. This game doesn't do that, so you'll have to go back to the events before you even get to Zanza, before you even fight Dixon, which is just extremely frustrating, and I didn't even want to go back, but I had to. I literally had no choice just because I just wasn't able to take him out. If anything, I wish the game would just casually give you more XP every time you die to at least maybe even help you get closer and closer to achieving your challenge, or at least just letting me go back, for crying out loud. Which was another problem I had, just some areas, their access being limited because of story elements that I couldn't go back to. For instance, I know that there are timed quests, but even that wasn't really preparing me for what would happen. For instance, I pretty much did all my quests and there was still a timed quest on my list. It was still listed on there, it wasn't taken away, and it told me that I had to go back to like the Mechon city in order to collect like a part from one of the Mechon. But I couldn't get there. You couldn't warp there anymore for some reason. So I had to eventually walk all the way back by going to the Mechon core and walking all the way back to the Mechon city in order to collect those things. And that was really frustrating to me. I'm like, why can't I just warp there? It's still there. Why can't I warp? The same thing with like Alchemoth. At the end of the game, like if you go back there, which you can, you just have to walk. So you have to literally go to Aerith and then go all the way to that platform to go up and then to go into Alchemoth, which I don't understand why I can't just warp there. It's still there. It's just ran over by Telethia now, which I don't understand why that doesn't mean I can't warp there. Like, why can't I warp to Alchemoth? But like I said, they're not huge problems at all. It only really got me towards the end of the game. And back to like the side quest thing, I just think it should be better side quests. I really didn't read hardly any of them or pay attention to the stories of any of them. And I know some of them had some really cool like different outcomes and stuff, but there was just so many of them. I had no patience to sit there and read through dialogue after dialogue after dialogue of over like 400 plus side quests. I just didn't care. But I now want to give you my final verdict and my future with this series. I finished Xenoblade Chronicles and just stared at a wall for about 20 minutes. I'm not joking. I couldn't believe what I just witnessed. It was a story that I've never experienced before in gaming. It was a world that I wanted to just live in and explore even more and just run around and find secrets and hidden things. It was such a fabulous journey, and it was an adventure that I never knew that I would take, but I am so mad at myself for not taking it sooner. Is it a perfect game? No. I think there's a lot of things that it could improve in the future and make me really love this game. And in fact, I will say it would probably be one of my favorite games of all time if the combat was a little bit more deep and the side quests were fixed up. But with that aside, it's still, without a doubt, one of the best titles on the Wii and probably one of the biggest underappreciated, most underrated games out there because, man, I can't believe how much I enjoyed this game. I mean, shoot, I put in almost 80 hours and at level 80, I love this game, and that tells you a lot because I'm not putting in 80 hours into just any game. I mean, that's mostly like Zelda time for me. So to do that with a brand new series like Xenoblade showed me just how much I really cared about this game, its cast of characters, and just the world that I was able to build and construct. If you're on the fence about Xenoblade Chronicles and you've been seeing the games and maybe you're even a hater like I once was, please give it a chance. Just try it. If you played any of the Mario RPGs or really any RPGs, or even if you haven't, just try it. just get past the first couple of chapters and tell me how you feel, because I'm telling you, it's going to get you locked. The story is going to pull you in, the world and its characters are going to bring you in, and you're going to want to do nothing but continue to move to the next area and see what's next, and see where the story goes next. And I promise you, you're not going to be prepared for what this story has in store, because it is just crazy. So I will say, from this day on, I am officially a Xenoblade fan. I can't believe those words are coming out of my mouth. And in fact, before I even finished this game, I did go out and buy Xenoblade Chronicles X already, the definitive edition on the Switch, just to have, because I know eventually I'm going to want to play it. But I'll be honest, as far as the future goes, I think I just want to continue playing this game right now. I want to go back and just try to 100% it the best I can. Work with those affinities, which I hate, but finished all the side quests remaining, take out some more of those special creatures and the bigger creatures across the map and level up as high as I can go, and also play that post game with Shulk and Melia, which is like future connected, I believe. So that's what I'll be doing probably for the rest of the year. I need a huge break though. I can't jump into the next game right now. It'll probably be next year sometime. But I think I'm going to go through the trilogy first before I go to Xenoblade X, and that's just because I want to continue the story. I heard the stories do bleed into each other, and they do have some references, and they do tie into each other, so I definitely want to continue this trilogy. I heard it's one of the greatest trilogies ever, so I definitely want to try it. So I will be playing Xenoblade 2 probably next year, or at least the very end of this year. But I am a fan. I'm ready to see what else this series has to offer, and I think you will too if you just give it the time of day. Give it a try if you haven't yet. I promise you, you won't be let down. I really love Xenoblade Chronicles, and I appreciate every single one of you that's been just kind of helping me through the game and talking with me and hyping me up on Twitter, because I've been talking about the game a lot there. You guys are awesome, and I'm actually now going to be actively interested when they announce a new Xenoblade game. I won't be upset, which feels pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. But the whole moral of this is expand your horizons, try things that you're not sure about, because you could be very, very shocked. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. We are very close to that Switch 2 Nintendo Direct. I hope you guys are getting hype, and I hope this video was just a fun watch for you until we get there. But thank you, and like always, I'll see you all on the next one. See you guys.